Right now, I'm 55 years old. I was born in 1960. I was born at a time in which, in this town, in a 75-mile radius, African-American kids were not allowed to be born in public hospitals. And so my first address was in the 25 Attic Court. And as my dad and mother worked to provide for us, provide for better lives for us, one of the things I realized nowadays we had structure in our home, we had structure in our lives. And one of the things you're going to find is that when we say get back to the basics of raising kids and building families, that's what we're all going to have to do.
That's right.
It doesn't matter what your faith is, you're going to have to get back to the basics of building healthy families. And those healthy families got to be based on healthy relationships.
That's right.
So I attended public schools here. I went to a couple of different elementary schools. Went to Warrington Middle School. Because we grew up, after we moved down to Attic Court, we were a couple of addresses on the west side. My dad, he primarily grew up on the east side. But then we moved out in a neighborhood called Warrington, right off Gulf Beach Highway. It actually sits between the two Navy bases, Fort Field Base and NAS Bankside. And so out there, I grew up basically during the 70s in those neighborhoods, interacting with kids that were military families, both black and white, and Asian, as well as kids who their roots were in Pensacola. And of course, most of us come by way of Alabama some kind of way or another. But what we wound up having a very well mixed and diverse neighborhood growing up. In 1974, I was over in the spring of 1974, I was over at Warrington Middle School when Alexender High School had its first race ride. And we had teachers there that got their students down on the floor because at that time, they didn't realize whether the kids that were rioting was going to throw bricks and bottles at the students in the schools. And so our teachers were concerned for our well-being, so they had us get on the floor. And what that kind of reminded me of later on is when I saw movies about the threat of bombs hitting America, and how children were taught to crawl on the desk and in an effort to try to protect themselves in wake of the fact that there was a bomb launched to hit the United States. So then in 1976, we had the second race ride, and it was over the Confederate flag. And the nickname at that time was Rebels. And so the school was pretty much destroyed. There was over $1 million worth of damage to the school. And there were kids that I had been in school with for years, from elementary school all the way up. And all of a sudden now we start finding ourselves on the opposite side of an issue that we really, if everybody had sense, we could resolve it, but there were adults involved. And that was part of the problem in getting something resolved. So in the course of those next 2 years, eventually after court hearings and proceedings, it came down to the students and the faculty would determine what would be the nickname and the mascot for Alexender High School. Because every graduating class between 74 and 78 had no nickname on it. And so in 1978, I was part of the first graduating class of Gators. So that's why now when I see the high school mascot on their diplomas, I know how it got to be there. And so it took faculty members as well as students working together and both desiring to see a safe neighborhood in the school, and that they had to be willing to step forward and commit to that. And I was a part of that, and of course I went off to college, and I went to historic black college in Atlanta, Morehouse College, and there was a lot of things, having experience here, really didn't prepare me for what I was about to see in Atlanta. Because if you all know Atlanta is predominantly black, and so there were black people pretty much in my day in and day out homes, whereas here I was a mixed population of people. But one of the things I learned when I was in Atlanta, that there was a commonality between the people in Atlanta and the people in Pensacola. One of the things that stuck out of my mind as a young man, a young black man going there, is that prejudice is everywhere. Because, you know, I didn't come from a family that had a history of attending college. My mom and dad were lower middle class workers. That means that they barely made enough to get by. They made so much that they didn't qualify for the special program, but yet instead they didn't make enough that they could provide all the things they needed for their kids. So my parents spent a lot of time out of the home working. Okay? So that means our kids, the kids were at risk of getting in trouble in various ways. And there were some things we got into at that time that we thought was just so bad. But when we look at what kids are getting in trouble with now, we find out it wasn't that bad at all. Right. But the thing about it, you had caring parents who were engaged, and if the man at the pack-a-sack store would call home and tell my parents that I was up at the store misbehaving, he could rest assured that my parents were going to take care of it. And if I remember Deputy Houston Harris, who just recently passed away, he was the only deputy that I remember seeing as a child. But if that deputy stopped at my house and told my parents that I was around the corner cutting up, he didn't have to worry about saying that again. Matter of fact, he could ride off rest assured that my parents were going to make sure that he didn't see me doing the same thing again. It's not that he wasn't going to see me again, because he was going to see me. But one thing for sure is that behavior that got me in trouble was definitely going to be corrected. So having grown up being exposed to law enforcement, and I found out later on that I was actually wanting to be a police officer at an early age. And so my dad never deterred me from wanting to be that. I grew pretty much growing up believing that whatever I wanted to be in life that was positive, number one, I could do it if I applied myself. Now, the thing about that is, growing up in an environment that you've got a mixed middle and lower income families, you're going to get tugs from different places. And that's what our youth are struggling with today. You're going to get tugs to get involved with this, you're going to get tugs to get involved with that. At the same time, the good, wholesome values that parents will pass on to their kids are questioned by young people because they don't understand it. They don't understand that the freedoms they enjoy today came at the sacrifice of people many years ago. They take for granted, and sometimes as a kid, I took things for granted. But one thing I realized is when I learned better, then it was a responsibility of mine to teach my children better, and it's a responsibility of mine to teach young people today better. So my being here is not because I felt like I had to. My being here is because I feel like I want to. And if there's any way we can work together to make a neighborhood safer, then it's going to take workshops and interactions like this to make that happen. So again, and don't be discouraged when it just a few people show up. Because let me tell you something, I spent the last 8 years going to town hall meetings. I've been cussed out, scolded at. I've been told what I don't do and what I ought to do. I've been told what if you really want to do something, this is what you need to do. I've been told all this stuff, but all the time when I go to these meetings and I look at who's out there in the trenches, those are the people that I'll keep doing all this for, because those are the ones that need to know that we're still engaged and we're determined that this should be liberty and justice for all people, not just for select few. So don't be discouraged if people don't show up and support you like you think they should. But just remember, when they rise up and they have something to say, you know, it's like I used to hear the old folks say, you have to treat them as a grain of salt, and you have to hound them with a long spoon. That's right. Watch what you take from them, because sometimes people hype you up and get you out there ready to burn down your whole town. And at the end of the day, they're not going to be here to suffer through the aftermath. That's right. So we're in this community together. That means we gotta get along together, and that means we gotta work together to make that happen. That's right. And that's where quality relationships are very important. And I can certainly tell you that down through the years, I have had the fortune of being able to build quality relationship with a very wide, diverse group of people in Pensacola. And I'm not done learning. I'm still learning even more. So what I challenge anybody is to step outside of your comfort zone and not commit yourself to the stereotypes, and then avail yourself to learn that just one thing all human beings have in common is that our blood is red. And then one thing about it, when we cease from breathing, life is over. So I don't know about you, but I tell people all the time, I want to live so long that I outlive the last undertaker. And somebody said, well, what you gonna do then? I said, that's not gonna be my problem. That's right. So we all want life, we all want liberty, and we all want to be happy. So today, knowing your